I remember I had just got arrested. I was in Texas. They sent me to this course, and it was New Braunfels, Texas. It was for like this Calmar. It was a piece of gear in HE. The one of the sergeants already knew that I was a troublemaker, and she said, "Don't send them. Don't send them. It's a bad idea." Everybody's like this. No, you need to give them a chance and let them go and everything. Soon as I got to that place that weekend, I got arrested. Went to jail. I come back. Obviously she's saying, I knew it. We shouldn't have sent you X, Y, and Z. I'm like, I get it. I get it. Whatever. And a lot of times, like what people don't understand is that when you're in a certain state of mind, even when people try to like call you out on certain things, you're not even trying to hear that because it's like, dog, like that's what you already thought of me anyway. So I don't care. And secretly, that's kind of what you think of yourself.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here, the Military Mental Health Podcast. Today's guest is Demetrius. He is a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, a motivational speaker, a published author, and host and creator of the podcast Extraordinary Thoughts for the Extraordinary Mind. Demetrius and I connected on Instagram, and I was so inspired by the content that he puts out and what he is doing. So I'm so excited to have you on the show today, Demetrius. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, absolutely. What's going on, everybody? It's that ordinary podcast with the extraordinary thoughts that tells you to stop being great and be extraordinary. I am so happy to be here, and thank you for having me, Rachel.
I'm so excited for this. You put out so much great content, so much inspirational stuff to the world. And I think that's really what the world needs right now is inspiration and, someone to maybe show the way, especially to our military audiences that maybe didn't have that example of leadership. So I love how you reflect that in everything that you do. But I'd love to just start out by hearing your story, your background, and tell the audience a little bit more about you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those who are like that are unfamiliar or never heard of me before, my name is Demetrius Thigpen. I go by Meech Speaks. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And when I say like I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, like I was born and raised in Detroit. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't born in the city outside of Detroit. I wasn't born somewhere down the street from Detroit. I was born on the east side of 8 Mile. You know what I mean? Raised in a single parent household. Mother graduated at the top of her class. Father was an alcoholic. And the thing is like when you have a father that's an alcoholic or that suffers from addiction, they're like a reoccurring character within your life. They come in your life. They say that they're going to have their life together. We're going to be a family. They leave. They come back in. They say these same things again, leave, and the cycle just continues. Like to put it really in like more of a retrospect. I remember when my father sat me down when I was 8 years old and told me that I was going to be the man of the house. He left, came back when I was 11. 11, 13, 13, 15, 15, 18, and I have recently just connected back with my father. You know what I mean? So that was a very interesting time just growing up. Also, growing up in Detroit is exactly what everybody think it is, but it's not like how the movie 8 Mile portrays it. You know what I mean? Ain't nobody rap battling in Detroit. I promise you that. Ain't nobody rap battling in Detroit. But the drugs are real, the crime is real, the violence is real, and you definitely learn how to survive at a very early age. And how I ended up in the military was kind of weird for me because you know how most people join for patriotic reasons. They want to serve their country or they have family that's in the military. Me, I really just needed to get out of Detroit. So when I was 8 years old, like my grandmother, she came up to me and she was like, baby, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to open up my own restaurant. And she was like, baby, they don't make a lot of money. And I'm like, all right, bet. So 2 weeks later, she come up to me again and she says, oh, baby, what do you want to be? And I'm like, well, I'm charismatic. I like making people laugh. I want to be a comedian. She says, baby, do you really want to be a joke for the rest of your life? I'm like, all right, man, then I don't know what I want to be. And unknowingly, what my grandmother had did was she had killed a dream. You know what I mean? Like, like when we were younger, we had dreams and we had dreams that were something that we really wanted to do. But a lot of people kill those dreams at such an early age because life beat them up. You know what I mean? And when I say like those people are like our parents, our grandparents, the closest ones to us, life beat them up and changed their views. So they project that onto us. And that's exactly what she did. She projected that onto me. So here I am going through high school while all my peers are stressed out about going to college, SATs, ACTs. I don't care because I don't even know what I want to do. Even if I went to college, what am I going to go what am I going to do there? In fact, I even tried to go to college. I dropped out within the first semester. And lo and behold, I come across this recruiter and he was wearing the most ugliest uniform I had ever seen. Like for real. Like I don't know if you see Marines in their uniform, like the dress blue deltas. You know what I mean? Like the khaki shirt, the blue pants, that was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. And then he had the white hat, and I'm like, oh my God. But I knew he was a military recruiter, So I sat down with him and I'm asking him questions. He had me take a pre-ASVAB. And then he said, do you have any questions for me? I'm in a Marine Corps office. And the first question I asked was, so how do you like being in the Air Force? So as soon as I do that, right? Like as soon as I do that, he ends up like, he yelling at me. I get my ass chewed. You feel me? Yeah, 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 yeah. He chewed my ass. And I'm like, I love this. This is for me. This is for me. I
You're
love
like,
this.
you're like, this is it. This
This is
guy,
it.
yeah, this is it.
This is it. Like whatever we got going on right now, I love this connection.
That's
I love
hilarious.
this. Next thing you know, I want to say like 6 months later, I was in boot camp. And when I got to boot camp, I was a shitbag Marine. Let me rephrase that. Graduated boot camp, did MCT, did MOS school, got to the fleet and found out that I was actually a shitbag Marine. Like I was a shitbag. And I know a lot of people always try to sugarcoat that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I was a knucklehead or I was a I was a troublemaker. Nah, man, I was a piece of shit. It is okay. You feel me? It's okay. I was 18, I was 19, I was young. And to grow up in a state of survival for so long and then come into an organization that required authority, that required order, that required, balance. I did not have that. So naturally I'm going to rebel against the machine. And it took good leadership, it took good mentoring to finally get me on the right path. And once I got on the right path, I never looked back. Fast forward, here I am becoming a top tier performer. And I know when people say, like, oh, I'm a top tier performer, they just doing some average shit. Nah, like I was really a top tier performer. By the time I became a corporal, I was already a martial arts instructor trainer. I was already a section, I was already a squad leader. I was already a section head. I was already doing the things that my predecessors had high hopes for me to do. But the thing is that when you're a top tier performer, one thing the military has is really good at is they will overwork the top tier performer. We're great at, extinguishing every resource for a shitbag Marine. We're great at that. You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure you've experienced it where, the Marine ain't, the Marine sailor, soldier, airman ain't doing what the fuck they supposed to do. And we gonna make sure he get help. Oh, you having marital problems? You know what? Let's get you counseling. Oh, you drinking? Let's get you over to Sacco. Oh, you have trouble waking up on time? We'll have somebody knock on your door. Meanwhile, the person that's carrying the shop, the one that's doing everything that he's supposed to do, suffers in silence. He suffers in silence. Marriage goes to shit. Put piss poor parent because he's always at the job, or he always puts the Marines first, or he always just puts the unit mission first. And that was me. I've missed births. I've neglected time with my family just so I can have more time at the job. I've always been that go-to Marine. And it finally came ahead when I was a sergeant. And I remember being a sergeant. And at this point now, I had developed a drinking problem. And, I laugh it off, but the reality is that I was drinking every night, and at some points I would overdrink. And it came to a head where I realized that I was really, really good. And I was so good that I should have gotten promoted, and that's another thing, we get into that sense of entitlement, of this idea of everything that I have done. These are the things I should be receiving. And I had gotten into that stage in my life where I was like, look at everything that I'm doing. Why am I not being rewarded for the things that I'm doing? I no longer am doing these things for the sake of just doing them or because it's good. I'm doing it for reward. And when I'm not receiving the reward, I'm starting to feel played. And I remember this day, like they come up to me, they say they got a meritorious board. My name's not on it for some reason. They said that I'm just not qualified, and I'm the most qualified Marine within a 5 mile radius. But I'm getting played, and I know I'm getting played, but nobody is saying anything about it. You know what I mean? So like when they talk about like toxic leadership, I've experienced this before. Where I've had like a piece of shit staff sergeant come up to me and say some things, and I'm just like, yo, like you wrong for that. You know you wrong for that, and you know that you can go get away with that. You know you are too. And I remember going home and I was drinking so bad that the next morning I woke up because I heard the dogs barking over in the neighbor's yard. I had passed out on the patio. And this cycle would continue so much. But the whole time, I'm still coming out to McMap. I'm still leading from the front. I'm still mentoring, guiding, providing advice that I'm not even taking to Marines. I'm leading the charge, but I'm suffering in silence. And with that, I decided I was like, I need to put these emotions, I need to put these feelings somewhere. And that's when I started the podcast, Extraordinary Thoughts for the Ordinary Mind. A podcast initially developed to help us become a better version of ourselves. But reality, it's the fact that we're as we navigate through these trenches of personal development, I'm just sharing my practical thoughts.
Yeah, I love everything that you talk about here. And I think that when you talk about the different cycles is the word I use because it seems the most appropriate. The cycles that you went through as a Marine, I think that so many of us that have been active duty or are now veterans or are currently active duty can relate to this. I think a
Mhm.
lot of people join the military for their own reasons, right? I mean,
Yep.
some it's patriotic, some it's not, but at some point we evolve from this either shitbag or someone who just doesn't know. I mean, I think everyone's a little rough in the beginning because it's something
100%.
entirely new. But we all hit this point where we're like, man, I'm doing kind of good. Like, maybe I could get somewhere with this. And we start to really focus on that reward. And I can remember, I mean, it only took me in the Navy, obviously, the ranking and advancement cycle is a lot different than a lot of the other branches, but it's test based. And I remember working my ass off and thinking that I was really, really good and having these goals and dreams and ambitions for myself. And then hitting a point where, I mean, there's multiple things combined, but hitting a point where I just kind of gave up on myself.
Mhm.
And in giving up on myself, also gave up on the people around me. But I also noticed what you talk about when you say the military will take care of the people who do not put in that effort, and the people who are putting in the effort suffer in silence. We see this all the time. I mean, so many people have these drinking problems. So definitely, you weren't alone in that, and I'm sure you're well aware of that, having served, or you're still serving in the Marine Corps to this day,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes, I'm still in.
Okay. So you talk about a lot of this stuff in your book. In your book, I mean, I really, really love that it is such a digestible platform to learn leadership. I think that someone that's in the military that wants to figure out where do I start, this is a good place to start. It's less than 100 pages. It's very digestible pieces. And it's called The Extraordinary Thought from an Ordinary Mind. And I'd love to hear before we get into the book specifically, because I know you touched on a lot of things that you talk about in your book as you're talking about your story. I want to hear where that shift took place for you to evolve from the shitbag Marine into the person you are today. Obviously, I'm sure it wasn't an overnight process, but if you could just touch on where that turning point was, if you remember, and what really happened to make that shift.
Oh, yeah, I think it was a series of events that led up. I honestly feel like I was, how do I say? Like we always talk about second chances. I feel like I was on like my second, third, fourth, fifth chance. People took a lot of risk with me. Some people did. A lot of people realized that I was a shitbag and was like this, hey, get them out of here. Which I don't blame them. You know what I mean? Like they doing their job. I get that. I remember I had just got arrested. I was in Texas. They sent me to this course, and it was New Braunfels, Texas. It was for like this Calmar. It was a piece of gear in HE. The one of the sergeants already knew that I was a troublemaker, and she said, "Don't send them. Don't send them. It's a bad idea." Everybody's like this. No, you need to give them a chance and let them go and everything. Soon as I got to that place that weekend, I got arrested. Went to jail. I come back. Obviously she's saying, I knew it. We shouldn't have sent you X, Y, and Z. I'm like, I get it. Whatever. And a lot of times, like what people don't understand is that when you're in a certain state of mind, even when people try to like call you out on certain things, you're not even trying to hear that because it's like, dog, like that's what you already thought of me anyway. So I don't care. And secretly, that's kind of what you think of yourself. So it really it's just like water going down a duck's back, to be honest with you. Then what happened next was is I ended up getting arrested again. I got arrested again. I got arrested a lot in the military. So there's that, but I got arrested and I'm going to the courthouse on base. And I remember hearing this song. And it was a song and it was called I'm just trying to save you before there's nothing left to save. And I forget who sings it, but I remember the song. And music has a way of playing at the right time with the right lyrics to hit you in the right spot. And I listened to the song and I was just like, damn, man, this is definitely my life right now. And I remember going home and I remember saying to myself, like, I really need to get my shit together. And I said it, I got my uniform ready, made sure my uniform was good, went into work with with a different attitude. 4 hours later, got my ass chewed again. And I bring that part up because a lot of times, like people say, like, you want to make this change for yourself. You know what I mean? Like you want to make this monumental change in your life. But the moment that life hits you and you get a setback, you immediately revert back to who you used to be. But Rome wasn't built in a day. Each day they built Rome. So even though, like, yeah, like, I got my ass chewed the day that I said I wanted to get my shit together, I still focused on getting my act together. People started to see that I was changing. That's when the leadership came. That's when the mentorship came. You know what I mean? Because now they're seeing that this might be a good investment. And I really want to take a moment because a lot of times, like people are always quick to say, like, oh, well, so and so doesn't believe in me. Oh, well, they don't see me, they don't see my potential. Let's stop for a second because you're not giving them anything to believe in. If you saw a stock plummeting and has no likelihood of coming back up, you're not about to put your money in that because you know that it's going to be a waste. And a lot of times people want people to believe in them. They want people to invest time, money, resources, effort into them, but they're not showing why. So the moment that I show people like, yo, like Thigpen's going to be a good investment, we need to invest in him, that's when the leadership kicked in. That's when the mentorship came in. And that support, ignited something within me. And I'm saying to myself, like, I really cannot let these people down because now they're believing in me. And slowly, just over time, I became who I am.
I love that you brought up that point about putting in effort as an individual before just expecting people to believe. Because I
Mhm.
mean, I think when we're talking about an organization like the military, I mean, these people who have been in the game for 15, 20 years, they've seen it all, right? I mean, there are people who legitimately just join the military and do not give a shit. There are people who are just there to do their 4 years, get out so they can use their GI Bill. I've talked to people like that. I've met people like that. And they're usually very cutthroat and straightforward and tell you, listen, I'm just here to do my 4 years to get my GI Bill. Now, I understand from a leadership standpoint maybe not wanting to take them on and fully mentor them as someone who wants to spend 20 years in or someone who really has goals and aspirations in the military. I don't think it means to give up on that person completely as a person, but approaching leadership, it's going to look a little bit different. But understanding that as individuals, we need to put in that effort ourselves and say that,
Yes,
hey, if I want someone to mentor me, if I want someone to really take that step and believe in me, then I need to give them something to work with. So I'm
100%.
glad that you brought that up. So your book specifically, you center a lot of what you talk about in that book around the O course in the Marine Corps, and you talked about a specific part where you had taken on the O course and you had this certain attitude about it, and things didn't necessarily go the way that you planned them to. So I'd love to just dive a little bit deeper into this and then segue this into talking about your book, because I think that that moment that you talk about in your book about the O course, how it was handled, is a very, very profound moment. And that there's so much that can be learned from not only that, but just how failure in general is handled and how you really talk about how this course is designed to help Marines handle failure. So I'll let you take it away and just share a little bit more about that story.
Absolutely. So, that story that you're referring to is in my book. I titled it The Story of Icarus. And I got that from, Greek mythology. I'm really big into Greek mythology, and it talks about the story of Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun. on a pair of wax wings. And that's exactly what happened. So when we talk about like the O course, to put it into perspective, this long journey of turning in, going from shitbag to top tier performer, I'm this top tier performer now. You know what I mean? Like I'm him. You know what I mean? Like I'm him. I'm exactly who my leadership wanted me to be. And here it is now, it's engineer day. And engineer day within my community is this big day where, multiple battalions will gather for like field meets. So it's about 1,500 Marines on this field. One of the events is the O course. Now they already had their initial roster. I think it was like 5 other people. They call the names out and they say that my name ain't on the roster. I'm like, how y'all not gonna have the best person for the job not on the roster? And I'm like, you know what? Hey, put me on it. Matter of fact, I kicked somebody off and got on it. So here I am on it. And not only am I on it, I also said, you know what? Fine then. I'm gonna get in front and set a good pace for everybody. My arrogance is at an all-time high. And I just want to take a moment because it's in these moments where we get good and we work our butts off to get to exactly where we're at. And there's no shame in being confident in what you have and who you are. But the problem is that you get so confident in your abilities that you end up becoming complacent. And that's exactly what I had got. I got complacent. So we start the O course and I'm going through it, go over the first obstacle, no problem. Go through the second obstacle. It was a little shaky, but I still am going through it. And by the time I get halfway through, I noticed that my competitor is starting to have he's starting to have trouble on one of the obstacles. So I'm not tripping anymore. I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this is going to be easy. All I got to do is just get up the rope. He's not able to get up the rope, and I'm not able to get up the rope. This is a problem. I get halfway up the rope and my arms lock up and they start, I guess they cramped up. I don't remember, but I ended up having to come back down. I shake my arms out, go back up the rope. My arms cramped up again. I come back down, go back up it, come back down, go back up it, come back down. This pattern continues. And the whole time that I'm not able to get up the rope, all my Marines are around. They're watching me. Matter of fact, my entire unit's around. They're watching me. Next thing you know, they call it and they say like, hey, both y'all are DQ'd. I'm the best guy for the job, I thought. And I just failed. And not only did I fail, I got us disqualified. And I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I walked away. I just really just needed a moment away from everybody. I tell that story because a lot of times, like, once again, it's not about the failures, it's how we handle ourselves in failure. You ever seen somebody go through something and they come out like it's a story that says like if you put a potato in boiling water, it's going to come out soft. If you put an egg in boiling water, it's going to come out hard. And that's kind of a description of somebody's personality or who they are when they go through adversity. Some people go in there hard and end up soft. Some people go in soft and end up hard. And that's exactly what ended up happening. I went in and I kind of like the adversity changed me. And as I was getting ready to give up on myself, somebody said like, hey, your Marines are out there. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, all your Marines are still out there waiting for you to get back up this rope. And I'm like, oh, man, I forgot that I always tell my Marines to keep that same energy. And what I mean by keep that same energy, the energy that you have in the beginning is the energy that you need to maintain throughout the entirety of the situation. Don't switch up because things ain't going the way that you wanted them to go. Keep that exact same energy from the beginning to the end. So when I came out there, they're looking at me and they're like this, keep that same energy, Sergeant. And I'm like this, I got to keep that same energy. And I stayed. And I'm talking about I stayed for 4 hours, pulling on the rope, blisters in my hands, blood on the rope, get back up, blisters on my hands, blood on the rope. For 4 hours, I had to stay out there. And I stayed out there because I was just like, you got to keep that same energy. I was so distraught from that event. I decided that I was going to step down as squad leader and, I just didn't feel comfortable leading Marines anymore. And this is where, you take a step back and you really got to be prideful. Or I was proud of the leadership that I had instilled in my Marines because they was like this, like, yo, whoa, we don't need you to step down. Like, I get it. Like, it was a big issue for you, but it's not that big of a deal. Even if you couldn't do it, you still kept going. And that is something that we have to ask. That's something that we can't, we have to be proud of, and we appreciate that from you. Because a lot of people would have walked away, they would have made excuses. You continue to push through. And that's something that we really appreciated. That's the story of Icarus.
I love it. And, something else that I really pulled from this story wasn't necessarily so much that you didn't give up, because, yes, that is a vital part, but also pulling that there is a group of people surrounding you that also didn't give up on you. And I think that's
Mhm.
so important because, we are such pack beings as humans. We
100%.
sometimes when we're down not far, we really need that support from other people. And I think that it comes back to leadership, but then it also goes full cycle to the people that are being led to also step up and help out that leader. I think in the military, we often expect these higher ranking or people in leadership positions to hold the entire team, but we forget that there's also a responsibility on the team to hold up that leader and then to also hold each other up. It's not pushed enough, I don't think. And so, I mean, what do you think was the point for you? Was that turning point where you really became that leader? I mean, it sounds like you were already a phenomenal leader before that point because these people really, really believed in you. Leadership isn't something that I think a lot of people are born into, especially with your background and where you came from. The odds were completely stacked against you, right? Most people in
Mhm.
your situation probably would not be where you are today. We see people in the military that come from where you came from, and a lot
Mhm.
of them, I mean, I've met people that came from where you came from and they got kicked out very early on. There's also people that don't even make it to the military. They stay caught up in that lifestyle on the
Mhm.
streets, in the drug game. And so I'm curious to know, what was it that really helped cultivate you into the leader you are today? Was it a specific instance? Was it a person? Or was it a culmination of a few things?
To be honest with you, I really think that it was a series of events. I think it started when I was a junior Marine with Sergeant Conziella and Corporal Duran. They were the ones that, those were my first mentors. Those were my first, that was my first idea of what leadership was. They molded me, they guided me, they pulled me under the wing, and they taught me everything that I knew. I would go on to teach my Marines these things that they had taught me. But the thing is that a lot of people don't understand is that, like, what you learn from somebody, you're learning what worked for them. That may not be the leadership style that works for you, but that was the leadership style that worked for them. It's gonna change over time, and when I started to develop into my own leader, I had to realize that I'm not Kay, I'm not Duran. And then life, that's another thing. Like, you got to pay attention. Life has always been a big teacher to me. I always try to stay sensitive to my environment. When I say be sensitive to your environment, I'm not saying in the sense that my environment could beat my ass or anything like that. I'm saying that I'm very aware of what my environment is trying to teach me. And in events like that, where I'm just like, that's a humbling experience. What is it trying to teach you? What can you learn from that? And it made me realize that failure is a big option. But what are you going to do when you fail? Now, I think the biggest thing that really taught me into who I wanted to be, or made me into who I am now, was this opportunity that I got when I was a sergeant. Now, by this time, I'm him. I am that go-to guy at this point. I have won NCO of a quarter, battalion, regiment, meth. I'm that guy now. I'm doing MAI courses. I'm featured in the Marine Corps Times. I am that guy. I cannot stress it anymore. But I'm also dealing with a lot of stuff internally that a lot of people don't know. And I'm going back and forth with this officer, my OIC at the time. Me and him are going back and forth. We had a personality dispute. We just our personalities just never like gelled well. And I ended up getting sent over to the substance abuse program. And for a lot of people that hear that, like, if you get sent over to SACO, like, all of a sudden you must be, you're a piece of shit. And I'm like, well, why am I getting sent over there? Once again, I'm the best guy. Why am I getting sent over there? And to be honest with you, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Literally the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I would go over there and I will work for somebody, or I will work with the staff sergeant who literally taught me. He didn't teach me how to be a great leader. He didn't teach me how to be a better Marine. He taught me how to be a better human. That's what he taught me. He taught me how to be a better human. And I felt like that's something that I kind of was missing for a long time. And I say that because, a lot of times, like, we get so caught up in the military that, we're the sergeant, we're the staff sergeant, we're our rank. No, we're human. You know what I mean? And we don't want to show these emotions because we're this rank. No, bro, you're a human. You have emotions. And he taught me really how to be human, Me and him would go, we would get lunch together, and we would just sit down and just talk about human things. It wasn't this military jargon. It was stuff that me and him could talk about. And if for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a friend, not a comrade, not an associate, a friend. And I would carry on the advice that he instilled into me throughout that entire year. And slowly it allowed me just to understand things a lot better. When a Marine shows up late, I'm not blasting them. I'm asking them like, yo, like, hey, what's the situation? Like, why you show up late? You feel me? Like, did you oversleep? You know what I mean? All right, well, don't let it happen again. It does happen though. You feel me? Like, how many times are we sleeping through our alarms? It happens to the best of us. You know what I mean? Hey, you ain't get a haircut this weekend? What happened? You know, your barber out of town? I get it. I don't want to get a messed up haircut. However, you gotta understand, you gotta work with me. You feel me? You know, you gotta get a haircut. You know, it allowed me to understand people better. You know, somebody that's having marital advice, I'm giving them real advice, not some military, oh, well, you know, rah, rah, rah. No, I'm like, hey, bro, like, you know, your wife is with the kids all the time. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I get it. You work 10 hours a day, but when you come home, you got to understand that she's been with them kids that entire time. Them kids ain't nothing to play around with. She with them. It's a big difference, and y'all got to meet in the middle. And that was the ability. Those were the key things that I was starting to able to talk about now. And it also helped because that's when I dove into the personal development space. You know, how can I talk about personal development when I'm not even a fucking person? You know what I mean? Like I'm a sergeant. That's how I see myself. But in reality, I was a person. And I think that was the big, it was a series of events that led up to that big moment right there.
That is so beautiful. And I say all the time that no one really teaches us how to be human. No one gives us this manual that says, this is how you are a human, and this is the right way to do it, and the wrong way to do it. It's not that black and white. But I think a lot of people come into the military with this idea that, oh, well, so and so leads this way. So I too will lead this way. And I saw this firsthand. I had really bad junior leaders, E5s, E4s, who were just emulating what the person who taught them to lead did.
Mhm.
And they didn't necessarily agree with it, but they're like, well, I mean, obviously it worked because so and so made it to E6, E7, but anyone can make it to E6 or E7 if you play your cards right in the military, right? Does it mean you're a good leader by any means? No, it does not.
Mhm.
But I love that you brought in that human factor piece to it because I think that is so key. So many people create an identity surrounding their rank, and it destroys them when they separate from the military. And this isn't even just military. I mean, this is people do it with careers, people do it with sports. I mean, you see
100%.
NFL players, NBA players that do the same thing. Say you're in a sport and you get an injury and you can't play anymore, but all you've done is revolved your life and created an identity around that sport. You feel like nothing when you no longer have that. And I've experienced this multiple times in my life. I was a former swimmer before, so I think I kind of knew going into the Navy not to really make myself a sailor. It was just a job that I did, and I made that separation. But a lot of people don't. And so I love that you had that really, really good mentorship to show you, like, hey, these people are human. You're also human, and this is how we lead.
You know, I love that you bring up like the athlete thing. Are you familiar with Ronda Rousey?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember how Ronda Rousey first came out and like she was putting everybody in like arm bars and like winning. She was a winner, right?
Oh, yeah.
She was a
Yeah.
champion. You remember when she took her first loss?
I don't.
It
I'm
was
familiar with her, but I'm not that familiar with her. So,
no, I mean, like, you know, I'm pretty sure like we've heard of it though. Like when she lost her first bout, she went through this big depression. And I remember seeing her on Ellen and she was talking about like I just didn't know who I was anymore. And I'm like, how the fuck did you not? How do you not know who you are? But I didn't understand it at that time. She had wrapped her head around, I'm a winner. And now that I lost, who am I now? That's why a lot of people struggle when they get out of the military. You spent the last 20, 22, 23, 24 years, 30 years of your life as a Marine, as a sailor, as a soldier, as an airman. And at this point now, you got to think about it. You was only a junior Marine for, I'll say 4 years. You feel me? The remainder, the biggest chunk, you've been in leadership positions. So you've been that guy for so long, and now you go back to the civilian world where nobody cares or nobody's thanking you for your service or nobody's standing at parade rest for you now, and you don't even know who you are. And that was something that I remember that Stats aren't teaching me. You know what I mean? He was like, "Hey, look, man, I'm Tim. I remember him saying that, and I would be like, "I'm Meech." And it was so weird to say my name to him. And he would talk to me like that. When we were out, when we were having lunch, he would talk to me like a human. When we was at work, we was at work. He taught me those things. And he said, like, what would you do right now if you had to get out of the military? And I was like, oh, telling him all these things. And he was like, man, you should think more on that because you have a gift. You speak, you're an author, your podcast is doing good. Like you really need to think more into these. The things that he taught me really helped me throughout my life, like now.
Yeah, there is really such a huge identity crisis between members of the military, but the military really sets us up for that. They strip your personality by putting everyone in the same uniform, same haircut. We take away first names, sometimes names in general. I mean, there's times when it was just going by rank only. And so you really lose that sense of who people are, and people really, really feed into that. And so I think, sometimes it's considered disrespectful to call someone by their first name, but I don't think that it is. It's just a time and place thing, right? If I see someone that's a leader out in town, I don't see anything wrong with talking to them as a human being instead of calling them chief or, whatever their rank is, because that's really embodying that rank structure piece of identity. So I love that you had that relationship and that really shaped who you are. It sounds like you were already into the speaking prior to this relationship. What
Yes.
really spearheaded you to start that platform of being a speaker?
Well, I've always been into speaking. My MOS in the military, one of my secondary MOSs is martial arts instructor trainer. So a part of that is having to be able to get up in front of people and talk. Found out early on in that journey that I was good at speaking. And the tie-ins that they had, or the guided discussions that they had, I always felt connected to them, so I could speak with them. I could speak about them with passion. And being able to do that, I ended up getting pulled to go to Lance Corporal seminars. I ended up going to corporal course graduations, or to sit in and talk to the Marines. And one day I was going to my first sergeant, and he says, "Hey, Sergeant Major, want to talk to you." Actually, Sergeant Major had already talked to him. First Sergeant needed to bring the message to me. And he said, "Hey, Sergeant Major said that you're going to be speaking at a Lance Corporal seminar." I said, "What?" I was like, First Sergeant Major don't want me speaking to them. Because I'm lock, cock, ready to rock, harder than woodpecker lips. And whatever I'm about to say to these Lance Corporals, I don't think they want to hear. And he's like, "Nah, Sergeant Major really, really wants you to go out there and speak to them." And I'm like, "All right, fine." And I remember speaking my first speech ever, and it was about $1. And I talk about the dollar, crumble it, step on it, rip it up, and talk about like the value. And this Marine, she comes up to me after I got done talking, and she gets to crying. I'm talking about tears, everything, crying. At this time, I'm not a person yet. I'm still just a sergeant. And I'm like, whoa, what are you crying for? I've made people cry before. Like that is not something I'm not foreign to this. I've made people cry before. But to see somebody cry because of what I said in a positive manner was very shocking to me. And I remember walking away from that, and I was saying to myself, like, damn, I might actually have something with this. I actually might. I ended up a sergeant. He comes up to me and says, "Hey, there's this opportunity to go speak at this college. You should give it a try." Once again, I'm like, should I do it? And the recommendations were, you got to be an E8, all of these high level recommendations. And I called the guy and I just told him, I said, "Sir, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not an E8, I'm an E5, but I'm a martial arts instructor trainer. I have X, Y, and Z years of speaking experience. I would be a great fit for this." And he said, "Hey, you know what? Come on down." So I'm sitting on this panel, and I remember this day because I'm sitting on this panel, and there's a guy with a doctorate, there's a CEO, this guy has a master's, and he's a business owner. This guy's a lawyer. This guy played in the NFL. And then if you look over there, you can just see me, the regular degular Marine. And I'm just sitting there like, dude, I am really on the panel with all these prestige educated gentlemen. And my aunt, I called her, and she, who is also a speaker, she said, "Do not get intimidated because they are educated. Do not get intimidated. Okay. Just because somebody is educated does not mean that they are better than you, Demetrius. Okay. You got a gift, and it's time for you to start making room for your gift." And I remember going out there and speaking. And when I tell you that, like, it was like I could see the words dancing around in the room. It was like as if I was painting a room with my story. And it was just this exhilarating feeling. And that's, people get to standing up, they clapping and everything like that. And I'm just blown away. Like I'm blown away. People are coming up to me, talking to me. And this is the first time someone has ever told me this. Like these are the first time I've ever heard people say that you're good at speaking and that, you have a gift and like strangers. Let me rephrase that. Strangers are telling me this. I didn't think that I would do good out in the civilian world. And I did. And I remember going to my car and just sitting there and just crying because I knew that I had a gift. And I think that's something that a lot of us, like, we spend so much of our time ignoring. And then when we find out when we get out of the military that we have a gift, but we don't have something to finance it. I had a gift and I found out that I had a gift in the military. And it was in that moment right there that I decided I was going to move forward in it and start financing my gift.
But just imagine for 1 second, had you let the fact that it was E8 as a requirement, had you let that hold you back? If you had looked at the requirements and you're like, oh, not an E8, can't
Yeah,
do it. We think about how these minor things, these decisions that we make, they really impact the trajectory of the rest of our life. And how many
100%.
times in the military, outside of the military, do people look at something and they feel unqualified? And then the thoughts come in, and you talk about this a lot in your book too, right? The thoughts that really, shape who we are. And yeah, we let ourselves be put down, but we do it to ourselves. We take care of all these other people around us. We encourage all these people around us. We're like, you can do it. But then we see that one little thing. We're like, but realistically, I mean, the worst they could have said to you on that phone call was no, but you called and you sold yourself and now you are where you are. So I love that is what really spearheaded you into what you are doing on the speaking platform. And I agree. I mean, I think you're a phenomenal speaker. I love what you
Thank
put out
you.
on Instagram. You're welcome. That being said, I'd love if you could just share with the audience where they can find you, the different platforms, how they can grab a copy of your book. And then I don't know if you're having any speaking engagements coming up where people can come to, or if you have maybe a website where people can follow that. But go ahead, share with the people.
But follow me on Instagram at Meech Speaks. Once again, that's Meech Speaks, Meech. You can also follow me on TikTok under Meech Speaks as well. You can grab a copy of the book Extraordinary Thought for an Ordinary Mind on Amazon, and it's on Barnes and Nobles. And lastly, don't forget to like, share, subscribe this podcast. But you can also, if you want to hear more of me, you can head over to my podcast, Extraordinary Thoughts for the Ordinary Mind, available on Spotify and iTunes and any other streaming service.
Well, Demetrius, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You put out so many golden nuggets. So much value just came out of this episode alone. And again, if you're listening in, please continue to follow Demetrius on his platforms. I mean, sometimes even just that 5-10 second clip on Instagram can really just change someone's day. I know for me it does. And so make sure you go give him a follow and support the podcast, his social media, and everything he's doing. Last thing, Demetrius, just to close off the show, is there any last words that you want to leave the audience with?
100%. Right now, somebody's driving to a job that they don't want for money that they need. The whole time that they're driving, their passions, their dreams, their aspirations live in the backseat of the car. They go to the job, they'll punch the clock, and they'll make somebody else richer. Then they'll come home and look their kids in the eyes, tell them to follow their dreams. The whole time that they did. A lot of us won't follow our dreams because, it doesn't make them money. A lot of us won't follow our dreams because people don't believe in them. A lot of us won't follow in our dreams because deep down we don't believe. And over time, what we end up doing is something that only will get us dated. We live check to check. When in reality, this ain't even something that you love. It's just something that you need to do to survive. And I feel like that's the worst thing to do. I feel like that's worse than dying, to be honest with you, to live a life unfulfilled like that. So I would tell anybody, follow your dreams, whatever that is. It's somebody right now that's making six figures dog walking. And you telling me that your passion can't make you something? Your passion can't be something that you want it to be? Me and you are both parents. So we understand nature versus nurture. And you remember when you had your child in your stomach, did you ask questions like, oh, I wonder how tall he or she's gonna be? I wonder if is it a boy or a girl?
Girl,
Girl. Okay, perfect, perfect. Did you ask, I wonder if she's gonna dye her hair, get tattoos? Did you ask these type of questions?
not at all.
No, you were just happy that you had a child inside of you. When she was learning how to walk, the biggest thing that I always refer to when we talk about our dreams is when a child is learning how to walk. When a child learns how to walk, it's one of the most clumsiest things that you ever see in your life. They are just happy to be on 2 feet and moving around. They take a couple of steps and they fall. And naturally, us as parents, we want to come to their rescue when they fall. But the child's not worried about falling. The child's more worried about how far can they get. And that's something that you got to take in consideration when you talk about your dreams and passions. You know what I mean? Is that your dreams aren't even walking yet, but you want them to get up and do a full sprint. Your dreams are barely getting a couple of steps, and you already want them to take care of you. But the same way that you got to nurture a child until they grow into adulthood is the exact same way that you got to nurture your dreams until they grow into adulthood.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for those words, Demetrius. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.